Vincent Morrison had always been a man of few words, but his silence carried weight. At 42, he possessed the kind of quiet intensity that made people step aside in crowded hallways without understanding why. His marriage to Rebecca had lasted 15 years, and to the outside world, they were the picture of suburban success. Vincent owned a small but profitable security consulting firm. Rebecca worked part-time at an art gallery, and their daughter Amanda was a senior at the local high school. What nobody knew was that Vincent's security consulting was a carefully constructed front. For the past 2 decades, he had been a cleaner for the Torino crime family. Not the kind who scrubbed bloodstains, but the kind who made problems disappear entirely. Bodies, witnesses, evidence, entire identities could vanish at Vincent's command. He had connections that reached into every level of law enforcement, politics, and organized crime along the eastern seaboard. Rebecca Morrison, née Hartwell, came from old Connecticut money that had dwindled to nothing by the time she reached college. Beautiful, charming, and desperate to maintain the lifestyle she'd been raised to expect, she had seen Vincent as her ticket back to comfort. She didn't love him, she loved what he could provide. For 15 years, she had played the perfect wife while secretly resenting every moment of it. The cracks in their marriage had started 3 years ago when Rebecca began working at the Whitmore Gallery. That's where she met Troy Kellerman, a 35-year-old sculptor with abs carved from marble and a trust fund from his pharmaceutical heiress grandmother. Troy was everything Vincent wasn't: artistic, talkative, emotionally available, and most importantly, from the world Rebecca felt she deserved to inhabit. Vincent had suspected for months. His training had made him paranoid, and paranoia had kept him alive in a business where trust was a luxury few could afford. The late nights at the gallery, the new perfume, the way Rebecca's eyes sparkled when she talked about promoting local artists, it all pointed to one conclusion. But Vincent was a patient man. He had learned long ago that rushing into action without complete intelligence was how amateurs got buried in shallow graves. So he watched, he waited, and he gathered evidence. The confrontation came on a Thursday evening in October. Vincent arrived home early from a business trip to find Rebecca's car gone and Amanda at her friend's house. He used his skills to search the house methodically, finding what he was looking for in Rebecca's jewelry box: a burner phone hidden behind a false bottom he hadn't installed. The text messages painted a clear picture. Rebecca and Troy had been lovers for 8 months. But it was the recent messages that made Vincent's blood run cold. "We need to be more careful. V is getting suspicious. Maybe it's time to just file for divorce. You could take half of everything. Half isn't enough. I've been trapped in this marriage for 15 years. I deserve more than half. What are you thinking? Amanda graduates in 6 months. After that, I want him gone. Permanently." "Becca, that's crazy talk." "Is it? You have connections through your art dealer friends. People who know people. Vincent has a dangerous job. Accidents happen in his line of work all the time." Vincent set the phone down carefully. In his profession, he had been threatened countless times, but never by his own wife. Never by someone who shared his bed, his home, his daughter. The front door opened downstairs. Rebecca was home. Chapter 2. The Accusation. Vincent slipped the burner phone back into its hiding place and went downstairs, his mind already working through possibilities. Rebecca was in the kitchen, humming as she unpacked groceries, playing the part of the devoted wife as she had for years. "You're back early," she said without looking up. "How was Chicago?" "Productive." Vincent poured himself a scotch, studying his wife's profile. Even knowing what he knew, he could appreciate why Troy had been drawn to her. Rebecca had maintained her figure religiously, and her auburn hair caught the kitchen light like spun copper. "Amanda at Kelly's?" "Studying for her SATs. I thought we could have a quiet dinner, just the two of us." Rebecca turned with a smile that would have been convincing to anyone who hadn't read her text messages. "Maybe we could talk about our vacation plans for the spring." There would be no spring vacation. Not for them. Over dinner, Vincent watched Rebecca perform her role flawlessly, discussing Amanda's college applications and her latest gallery exhibition. She was good, he had to give her that. But Vincent had spent 20 years reading people who lied for a living, and Rebecca was an amateur. The next evening, Vincent was in his study when he heard Amanda come home. His daughter was a miniature version of her mother, with the same auburn hair and green eyes, but she had inherited Vincent's sharp intelligence. She was one of the few people in the world he truly loved. Dad, Amanda knocked on the study door. Can I talk to you? Of course. Vincent gestured to the chair across from his desk. Amanda sat down, fidgeting with her sleeves. I need to tell you something about Mom. Vincent's expression remained neutral. What about her? She's been acting weird lately. Making phone calls she doesn't want me to hear. And last week, when you were in Philadelphia, this guy came to the house. They went upstairs to your bedroom. The words hit Vincent like a physical blow, but his face showed nothing. Did you recognize him? Troy something. He's one of the artists from Mom's gallery. Dad, I think. Amanda's voice broke. I think she's cheating on you. Vincent reached across the desk and took his daughter's hand. I know. You know? Amanda's eyes widened. What are you going to do? I'm going to handle it. Vincent's voice was soft, but Amanda had grown up around him long enough to recognize the dangerous undertone. But I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to stay at Kelly's house this weekend. Whatever happens, I don't want you here. Amanda nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. Dad, you're not going to do anything illegal, are you? Vincent smiled, and for a moment, he was just her father again. I'm going to do what I have to do to protect our family. The next morning, Vincent called in favors from contacts in 3 different police departments. By noon, he had a complete dossier on Troy Kellerman, including financial records, social media activity, and a detailed background check that revealed information Troy himself had probably forgotten. Most importantly, Vincent learned that Troy owed significant money to several dangerous people, information that would prove useful very soon. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of autumn chill that made smart people stay indoors. Vincent was in his study, ostensibly reading, when he heard Rebecca on the phone in the kitchen. Tonight, she was saying. Vincent's distracted with work stuff. He won't suspect anything. Vincent set down his book and checked his watch. 8:47 p.m. Perfect timing. He walked to the kitchen where Rebecca was ending her call. She turned with another of her perfect smiles. That was Diane from the gallery. We're having a small emergency meeting about the upcoming charity auction. This late on a Saturday? You know how these art people are? Very dramatic about deadlines. Rebecca kissed his cheek, and Vincent caught a whiff of the expensive perfume Troy had apparently bought her. I shouldn't be too late. Vincent nodded. Drive safely. 20 minutes after Rebecca left, Vincent made his move. He called 911 from a burner phone, reporting a domestic disturbance at his own address. Then he called his daughter. Amanda, I need you to come home right now. Bring Kelly if she wants to come. I need witnesses for what's about to happen. Dad, what's going on? Your mother is about to learn what happens to people who betray me. Chapter 3, The Captain's Revelation. Amanda arrived home with Kelly just as the police cars were pulling into the driveway. Vincent met them at the door, his shirt deliberately torn and his face bearing a carefully applied bruise that would look convincing under the porch light. Dad, what happened? Amanda rushed to him, and Vincent was genuinely moved by the concern in her voice. Your mother brought her boyfriend here, Vincent said loud enough for the approaching officers to hear. They attacked me when I confronted them. Officer Martinez, a young cop Vincent didn't recognize, was the first to reach the door. Sir, we received a report of a domestic disturbance. My wife called the police on me, Vincent began, his voice carrying across the yard. He threatened to kill us all. She sobbed to the officers. Rebecca was emerging from Troy's car, looking genuinely confused and frightened. She had clearly been at Troy's apartment, and they had raced back when she received Vincent's text claiming there was an emergency at home. Officer, thank God you're here, Rebecca cried, running up the walk. My husband has been acting crazy all week. Tonight he completely lost it. Amanda nodded, playing her part perfectly. Dad's been acting crazy, officer. Vincent allowed himself to be handcuffed, noting the satisfaction in Rebecca's eyes as she watched. She thought she was winning. She thought this was her chance to paint him as an unstable, violent husband. They handcuffed him without question, and Vincent was loaded into the back of a patrol car. As they drove away, he watched Rebecca and Troy in the rearview mirror, holding each other and talking animatedly, no doubt planning how to spin this situation to their advantage. At the station, the booking process was routine until Vincent requested his phone call. Officer Martinez led him to a phone in a small room off the main booking area. I asked for my one phone call, Vincent announced clearly, making sure his words carried. Instead of calling a lawyer, Vincent dialed a number he had memorized but never hoped to use. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. Yeah, this is Morrison. I'm calling in my marker. There was a pause. Jesus Christ, Vince. What do you need? I'm at the 12th precinct. Domestic situation. I need out in 20 minutes. And I need the responding officers to understand that they've made a very serious mistake. Consider it done. Vincent hung up and sat back to wait. His marker was with Frank Rizzo, a captain in the organized crime task force who owed his life to Vincent's intervention 3 years earlier. Frank had been investigating a money laundering operation when he got too close to the truth. Vincent had received orders to eliminate the captain, but instead, he had warned Frank and helped him fake evidence that led to the arrest of several mid-level criminals while protecting the operation's true scope. Frank never learned who had saved him, but Vincent made sure the captain received an anonymous message afterward. You owe me one. I'll collect someday. 20 minutes later, Vincent heard shouting from the main area of the station. Heavy footsteps approached the holding area, and the door burst open. The captain stormed in, his face red with barely controlled fury. Release him immediately. Officer Martinez looked confused. Captain Rizzo, sir, this is a domestic violence case. The wife and daughter both. I don't give a damn what they said. Rizzo's voice could have cut glass. Get those cuffs off him right now, and then you're going to apologize. Sir, I don't understand. What you don't understand could fill a library. Rizzo turned to Vincent as Martinez reluctantly removed the handcuffs. Mr. Morrison, on behalf of this department, I apologize for the inconvenience. Vincent rubbed his wrists and straightened his shirt. No harm done, Captain. Rizzo turned back to Martinez, who was looking increasingly pale. Officer, you just arrested a man who has provided invaluable assistance to federal law enforcement agencies for the past 2 decades. Mr. Morrison's work has prevented terrorist attacks, dismantled human trafficking networks, and kept this city safe in ways you'll never know about. It was mostly true, Vincent reflected. His work for the Torino family had occasionally aligned with legitimate law enforcement goals, and he had indeed prevented several situations from spiraling into public violence. The details were more complicated, but Rizzo was selling the story beautifully. But the wife, Martinez started. The wife, Rizzo interrupted, is about to learn that making false accusations against a man like Mr. Morrison is a very serious mistake. He stared at Rebecca, who had been brought to the station to give her statement. Ma'am, do you have any idea who you just accused? He's. Rizzo paused dramatically, a decorated federal consultant whose work is classified at the highest levels. Your husband is a hero, Mrs. Morrison, and you just tried to destroy him. Rebecca's face went white. Vincent could see her mind racing, trying to understand how her carefully planned frame-up had gone so wrong. There must be some mistake, she stammered. Vincent owns a small security firm. He's not. Ma'am, Rizzo's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. I suggest you think very carefully about your next words. Making false statements to police officers is a felony, and given your husband's status, this incident will be reviewed by federal authorities. Vincent watched as Rebecca's perfect world began to crumble around her. She had thought she was married to a small-time security consultant she could manipulate and eventually eliminate. Instead, she had just learned that her husband was connected to levels of power she couldn't comprehend. But this was only the beginning. Vincent had spent 15 years giving Rebecca everything she wanted while asking for very little in return. He had been patient with her coldness, understanding about her emotional distance, and generous with his money and protection. That patience was over. As they left the police station, Rebecca kept glancing at Vincent as if seeing him for the first time. Troy, who had been waiting in the parking lot, approached cautiously. Becca, what happened in there? They said they were releasing him, and Vincent turned to look at Troy directly for the first time. The younger man was handsome in the way that came from good genetics and expensive personal trainers, but there was weakness in his eyes. Vincent had broken harder men than Troy Kellerman before breakfast. Mr. Kellerman, Vincent said pleasantly, I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Troy's face flushed. Look, I don't know what Becca told you, but Becca didn't tell me anything. She didn't need to. Vincent's smile was cold as winter moonlight. But don't worry. We'll have plenty of time to get acquainted very soon. The ride home was silent except for Rebecca's occasional attempts to explain herself, each excuse weaker than the last. Vincent said nothing, allowing the weight of what she didn't know to press down on her. When they reached the house, Amanda was waiting in the living room, still playing the part of the concerned daughter. "Mom," she said quietly, "we need to talk." Rebecca looked between her husband and daughter, and Vincent could see the moment when she realized that her family, her safety net, her comfortable life, was no longer under her control. "Amanda, honey, there's been a misunderstanding." "No," Amanda said firmly. "There hasn't. I know about Troy. I know about the phone calls. And I know about what you've been planning." Rebecca's legs gave out, and she collapsed into a chair. "How long have you known?" Vincent answered for his daughter. "Long enough. The question now, Rebecca, is what you're going to do about it." Chapter 4. The web begins to tighten. Over the next 3 days, Vincent watched his wife struggle with her new reality. Rebecca had always been in control of her image, her environment, her relationships. Now she found herself married to a man whose true nature was a complete mystery, while her daughter looked at her with thinly veiled disgust. Troy had called 17 times since Saturday night. Rebecca hadn't answered once. Vincent used the time to finalize his plans. On Tuesday morning, he drove to a storage facility in Queens that officially didn't exist. His keycard opened a unit that contained enough weapons to outfit a small army, along with documents, cash, and equipment that could vanish entire identities or create new ones from nothing. He selected what he needed and made several phone calls to people who owed him favors. By Wednesday evening, Vincent had assembled a comprehensive plan that would destroy both Rebecca and Troy while keeping his own hands technically clean. The first move came Thursday morning. Troy received a visit from 2 men in expensive suits who identified themselves as representatives of Vincent Morrison's business interests. "Mr. Kellerman," the larger man said as they cornered Troy in his art studio, "Mr. Morrison wanted us to deliver a message." Troy had been expecting this. He had barely slept since Saturday, jumping at every sound and checking the locks on his doors obsessively. "Look, whatever this is about, I can explain." "No explanation necessary. Mr. Morrison understands that you've developed feelings for his wife. He also understands that Mrs. Morrison has been receptive to your advances." Troy blinked in confusion. This wasn't the threat he had been expecting. The second man, who looked like he could bench press a small car, smiled pleasantly. "Mr. Morrison is a reasonable man. He believes that if his wife prefers your company to his, then perhaps the situation can be resolved amicably." "I don't understand." "Mr. Morrison is prepared to grant his wife a divorce. He's even willing to be generous with the settlement, provided certain conditions are met." Troy felt a spark of hope. Maybe Vincent wasn't the dangerous man Captain Rizzo had implied. Maybe this could all be worked out civilly. "What conditions?" "First, you and Mrs. Morrison must be completely honest about the nature and duration of your relationship. No more lies, no more deception. Mr. Morrison values honesty above all else." That seemed reasonable. "Okay. Second, you must be prepared to provide for Mrs. Morrison in the manner to which she's become accustomed. Mr. Morrison has spent considerable money ensuring his wife's comfort. If you want her, you need to prove you can support her. Troy's trust fund could handle that." "I can do that." "Excellent." The first man reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. "This contains documentation of Mrs. Morrison's spending habits over the past 5 years. As you can see, she has expensive tastes." Troy opened the envelope and nearly choked. The numbers were staggering. Rebecca spent more on jewelry in a year than most people made in salary. "There's also the matter of Mrs. Morrison's debts," the second man continued. "Credit cards, personal loans, various expenses she's hidden from her husband. If you're going to be together, those become your responsibility." The debt figures made Troy's trust fund look suddenly much smaller. "Of course," the first man said casually. "There's also the matter of your own financial obligations." Troy's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Your gambling debts, Mr. Kellerman. Did you think those would just disappear? Mr. Morrison's associates have purchased those debts from your original creditors. The total, with accumulated interest, comes to roughly $340,000. Troy's legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair, staring at the figures on the paper. "That's impossible. I only owed maybe $50,000. Interest compounds quickly when you're dealing with certain types of lenders." The man's smile never wavered. "But Mr. Morrison is prepared to forgive those debts entirely as a wedding gift, provided you meet the other conditions." "What other conditions?" You must convince Mrs. Morrison to liquidate her assets, jewelry, art collection, personal property, to help cover her existing debts before the divorce. Mr. Morrison wants a clean break with no outstanding financial obligations. Troy was beginning to understand that he was being maneuvered into a trap, but he couldn't see the edges of it yet. And finally, the second man said, "You must sign a confession detailing your relationship with Mrs. Morrison, including any discussions about harming Mr. Morrison or his business interests." "We never talked about harming anyone." Both men's expressions turned cold. "Mr. Kellerman, we have recordings that suggest otherwise." Mrs. Morrison was quite explicit about her desire to see her husband suffer an accident. Troy's heart hammered against his ribs. "I never agreed to anything like that. I told her it was crazy." "Then you'll have no problem signing a statement to that effect, will you?" Chapter 5. The Pressure Builds. While Troy was being systematically dismantled, Rebecca was facing her own pressure campaign. Vincent had taken to working from home, ostensibly to keep an eye on her while they worked through their problems. In reality, he was orchestrating her psychological destruction with surgical precision. The first crack came when Rebecca discovered that her credit cards had been canceled. All of them. "Vincent, there must be some mistake," she said, waving a handful of plastic. "None of my cards are working." Vincent looked up from his laptop with mild interest. "I had them canceled. Given recent events, I thought it was prudent to review our financial arrangements." "You can't just cancel my credit cards." "I can, and I did. They were tied to accounts in my name, funded by my business. Since you've been less than honest about your spending, I decided to simplify things." Rebecca's voice rose. "How am I supposed to buy groceries? Pay for gas? You can ask me for money when you need it. After all, we're married. Husbands and wives should communicate about these things." The humiliation was calculated and precise. For 15 years, Rebecca had enjoyed complete financial freedom. Now she couldn't buy a cup of coffee without Vincent's permission. The second crack came when her mother called. "Rebecca, darling, what's this I'm hearing about Vincent being some kind of federal agent?" Rebecca's blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about, Mother?" "I just had lunch with Patricia Whitmore. You know, from the country club. She said her nephew works for the police department, and apparently there was quite a stir over the weekend about some high-level government consultant being arrested by mistake." The description sounds very much like Vincent. Rebecca realized that Vincent's true identity, whatever it was becoming public knowledge in certain circles. Her friends would know soon, if they didn't already. The wife who had tried to have her heroic husband arrested for domestic violence would become a social pariah overnight. "Mother, I have to go." "Rebecca, if Vincent is really involved in something dangerous, you need to be very careful. Men like that." Rebecca hung up the phone. The third crack came when Amanda announced she had been accepted to Stanford with a full academic scholarship. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Rebecca said, trying to summon enthusiasm while her world collapsed around her. "California will be." "I'm not going," Amanda said quietly. "What?" "But Stanford is your dream school." Amanda looked at her father, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I've decided to stay local for college. I want to be close to family during this difficult time." Rebecca understood the subtext. Amanda was choosing Vincent over her. Her own daughter was cutting her off, just as Vincent had cut off her money. That evening, Rebecca tried calling Troy. The call went straight to voicemail. "Troy, it's me. Please call back. I need to know what's happening. Vincent knows about us, but I think we can work something out. He seems different than I thought. Just call me back." Troy didn't call back. He was too busy dealing with his own crisis. Vincent's men had been busy. They had visited every gallery that showed Troy's work, every art dealer he knew, every collector who had ever bought one of his pieces. The message was simple. Troy Kellerman was about to be exposed as a fraud and a criminal. Anyone who continued to associate with him would face scrutiny they wouldn't enjoy. Within 48 hours, Troy's career was in ruins. Gallery showings were canceled, commissions were withdrawn, and his art dealer stopped returning his calls. On Friday morning, Troy finally called Rebecca back. "We need to meet," he said without preamble. "But not at my place, and not at yours. Somewhere public." They met at a coffee shop downtown, both looking like they hadn't slept in days. "Rebecca, I think your husband is going to kill me," Troy said without preamble. "Don't be ridiculous. Vincent isn't violent." "Isn't he?" Troy pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. It was Vincent, taken with a telephoto lens, shaking hands with a man Rebecca didn't recognize. That's Vincent meeting with Anthony Torino Jr. Do you know who that is? Rebecca shook her head. He's the son of Anthony Torino Sr., head of the most powerful crime family on the East Coast. Your husband isn't a federal consultant, Rebecca. He works for the mob. Rebecca stared at the photo, her mind reeling. Everything started to make sense. The mysterious business trips, the cash payments, the way Captain Rizzo had treated Vincent with such deference. There's more, Troy continued. I owe some very bad people a lot of money, and somehow your husband now owns those debts. He's offering to make them disappear if I sign a confession admitting that you and I plotted to kill him. That's insane. I know we never planned anything like that. But apparently your text messages suggest otherwise. Rebecca's phone buzzed. A text from Vincent. Come home. We need to talk. I have to go, she said, standing on shaking legs. Rebecca, wait. Troy grabbed her arm. We can still run. I have some money put away. We could disappear, start over somewhere. Rebecca looked at Troy, really looked at him, for the first time. He was handsome, charming, and weak. She had been planning to use him to escape her marriage, but now she realized he was just another trap. Troy, she said gently, if Vincent really is what you think he is, then running would just make things worse. Chapter 6. The Confession. When Rebecca arrived home, she found Vincent in his study with Amanda. They were reviewing college brochures, looking for all the world like a normal father and daughter planning for the future. Rebecca, Vincent said without looking up. We were just discussing Amanda's college options. Did you know that if she stays local, she could live at home and save money on room and board? That's wonderful. Rebecca's voice sounded strange to her own ears. Amanda, would you give your mother and me some privacy? Amanda nodded and kissed Vincent's cheek before leaving. She didn't acknowledge Rebecca at all. Vincent closed the study door and gestured for Rebecca to sit. She remained standing. I know what you're thinking, she said quickly. About Troy and the text messages and everything. But you have to understand. I understand perfectly. Vincent's voice was calm, almost conversational. You've been having an affair for 8 months. You've been stealing money from our joint accounts to pay for gifts and trips with your lover. And you've been planning to have me killed so you could inherit my estate without the complications of a divorce. Rebecca's denials died in her throat. There was no point in lying anymore. The question, Vincent continued, is what we're going to do about it. Vincent, please. I made mistakes, but I never actually tried to hurt you. The text messages were just fantasies. I was angry and frustrated, but I would never actually. I believe you. Vincent's response surprised her. I don't think you have the courage to actually murder anyone. But the intent was there, and intent matters. He opened a drawer in his desk and withdrew a thick folder. This contains detailed documentation of your affair, your financial irregularities, and your communications with Troy. There's enough here to destroy your reputation and ensure you receive nothing in a divorce settlement. Rebecca felt tears building in her eyes. What do you want from me? I want you to understand who you've been married to for 15 years. Vincent stood and walked to a painting on the wall, an abstract piece Rebecca had always hated. He removed it, revealing a safe. From the safe, he withdrew several items, photographs, documents, and what looked like military medals. My name is Vincent Morrison, but that's not the name I was born with. I've been Vincent Morrison for 22 years, ever since the Army decided that Staff Sergeant Vincent Kowalski knew too much about certain operations in Eastern Europe. He handed her a photograph. It showed a younger Vincent in military fatigues, standing with a group of other soldiers. I was part of a classified unit that handled problems the regular military couldn't touch. When our work became politically inconvenient, we were given new identities and new lives. Rebecca stared at the photo, trying to reconcile the man she thought she married with the soldier looking back at her. For the past 20 years, I've worked as what you might call a problem solver for various interested parties. Sometimes that meant eliminating threats to national security. Sometimes it meant protecting assets or witnesses. And sometimes it meant doing things that would keep you awake at night if you knew the details. He handed her another document, what looked like a commendation from the Department of Defense. I've killed 17 people in the line of duty, Rebecca. Enemies of the state, mostly, but also a few criminals who threatened operations I was protecting. I'm very good at making people disappear. Rebecca's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the papers. The reason Captain Rizzo was so eager to release me is that I've saved his life and the lives of several other law enforcement officers. I've prevented terrorist attacks, dismantled human trafficking networks, and eliminated threats that would have cost thousands of innocent lives. Vincent took the documents back and returned them to the safe. I've spent our entire marriage protecting you from this world. You've lived in comfort and safety because dangerous people respected my ability to hurt them. And how did you repay me? Rebecca was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. You conspired with your lover to have me killed. You didn't care that Amanda would lose her father. You didn't care that my death would eliminate the protection that keeps you safe. You only cared about money. Vincent, please. I'm not going to kill you, Rebecca. That would be too easy, and it would traumatize Amanda. But your life as you've known it is over. Vincent returned to his desk and withdrew a legal document. This is a divorce petition. You'll sign it, along with an agreement that grants me full custody of Amanda and absolves me of any financial responsibility for your future welfare. Rebecca stared at the papers through her tears. Vincent, you can't just throw me away like garbage. I'm your wife. You were my wife. Now you're a liability I need to manage. Vincent's voice was cold as Arctic wind. You have two choices. Sign the papers and disappear quietly, or refuse and face the consequences of your actions. What consequences? Vincent smiled, and Rebecca felt ice in her veins. Let me tell you about some of my former colleagues who are now in the private sector. They specialize in collecting debts from people who think they're too important to pay their bills. I could have you declared a threat to national security, which would make you eligible for extraordinary rendition. Or I could simply leak information about your affair and murder plot to certain interested parties who would handle the situation without involving the legal system. Rebecca understood. She was trapped completely. No matter which way she turned, Vincent controlled her fate. There is one other option, Vincent said after a long moment. What? You and Troy could disappear together. New identities, enough money to start over somewhere quiet and remote. All you have to do is convince Troy to sign a confession detailing your plot against me. Rebecca looked up sharply. You want Troy to confess to something we didn't actually do? No, Rebecca. I want Troy to confess to something you absolutely did plan to do, whether you had the courage to follow through or not. Your text messages are quite explicit about your intentions. And if Troy won't sign, Vincent's smile was terrible to behold. Then Troy will face the full consequences of owing money to very dangerous people, and you'll face the consequences of betraying a man who has spent 20 years learning how to destroy his enemies. Chapter 7. The Final Trap. Troy received the call at 2 a.m. on Saturday morning. A voice he didn't recognize told him to be at Pier 47 at midnight the following evening, alone, if he ever wanted to see Rebecca alive again. What have you done with her? Troy demanded. Nothing yet. But Mrs. Morrison's future depends on your cooperation. Bring the signed confession we discussed, and enough money to cover your gambling debts. Come alone, or she dies. The line went dead. Troy spent the day liquidating everything he could. His trust fund, his art collection, even his car. Everything went toward raising the money Vincent's people demanded. By evening, he had managed to scrape together $280,000, still short of the full amount, but hopefully enough to negotiate. The confession was harder to write. Troy had to admit to planning Vincent's murder while implicating himself in conspiracy charges that could send him to prison for decades. But if it would save Rebecca and get them both out of this nightmare, he would sign anything. What Troy didn't know was that Rebecca was at home, safe in her own bed, having signed Vincent's divorce papers 12 hours earlier. She had chosen to save herself rather than wait to see if Troy would sacrifice himself for her. Vincent had anticipated this. He understood that when faced with real consequences, both Rebecca and Troy would prioritize their own survival over any romantic ideals about their relationship. At 11:45 p.m., Troy arrived at Pier 47 with a briefcase full of cash and a signed confession. The pier was deserted except for a few industrial lights casting long shadows across the water. Vincent emerged from the shadows alone, dressed in dark clothing that made him look more like the killer he was than the suburban security consultant he pretended to be. Mr. Kellerman, thank you for being punctual. Where's Rebecca? Safe. For now. Vincent gestured to the briefcase. I assume you brought what we discussed? Troy held up the confession. I signed it. Everything you wanted. But I want to see Rebecca first. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, Rebecca has already made her choice. Troy's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? Vincent pulled out his phone and showed Troy a photo. It was Rebecca signing legal documents in Vincent's study, with a timestamp from earlier that morning. Rebecca signed divorce papers this morning. She chose to save herself rather than risk her life for a relationship that was always built on lies. Troy stared at the photo in disbelief. That's impossible. She loves me. Rebecca loves money and security. You were just a way to escape a marriage she found boring. When she learned what I'm really capable of, she decided that you weren't worth the risk. The truth hit Troy like a physical blow. He had liquidated his entire life for a woman who had abandoned him at the first sign of real danger. But I signed the confession, he said weakly. Yes, you did. And I thank you for that. Vincent held out his hand. May I see it? Troy handed over the document with numb fingers. Vincent read it quickly, then smiled. Very thorough. This confession details your affair with my wife, your discussions about having me killed, and your plan to inherit my estate through Rebecca. It's signed, dated, and witnessed. This document will ensure that if you ever try to contact Rebecca again, or if you ever try to retaliate against my family, you'll face federal conspiracy charges. You bastard. You played us against each other. I gave you both exactly what you deserved. Rebecca chose money over loyalty, and you chose passion over common sense. Neither of you considered the consequences of betraying someone whose entire career has been built on eliminating threats. Vincent pocketed the confession and turned to leave. Your gambling debts have been forgiven, Mr. Kellerman. Consider it a gift. But if you ever come near my family again, I'll make you disappear in ways that will ensure you're never found. Wait, Troy called out desperately. What about the money? What about Rebecca? Vincent paused. Keep your money. You'll need it to start over somewhere far from here. As for Rebecca, she's no longer your concern. She made her choice. Troy watched Vincent disappear into the shadows, leaving him alone on the pier with a briefcase full of money and the crushing realization that he had been outmaneuvered by a professional who had been planning this outcome from the beginning. Chapter 8. Rebecca's New Reality. The divorce was finalized within 30 days. Vincent's lawyer had friends in the family court system, and Rebecca's adultery and the signed confession provided ironclad grounds for fault-based proceedings. She received nothing. No alimony, no property settlement, not even her personal jewelry, which had been purchased with money from Vincent's accounts. Rebecca found herself 37 years old, unemployed, and living in a studio apartment in a neighborhood she had never imagined herself inhabiting. The gallery fired her when news of the scandal broke, and her friends from the country club stopped returning her calls. Her mother's phone calls became increasingly desperate. Rebecca, darling, you need to fight this. Get a better lawyer. Vincent can't just leave you with nothing. He can, mother. And he did. Rebecca was sitting on a second-hand couch in her tiny apartment, eating ramen noodles and watching afternoon television. I signed a prenuptial agreement 15 years ago that I never bothered to read carefully. It protected Vincent's assets in case of adultery. But surely there's something. There's nothing. I have a high school education and 15 years of volunteer work at charity functions. No real job experience, no marketable skills, and a scandal that follows me everywhere I go. The reality of her situation was becoming clearer every day. She had spent 15 years married to a man who could have given her anything she wanted, and she had thrown it away for 8 months of excitement with someone who had abandoned her at the first sign of trouble. The knock on her door came on a Tuesday evening. Rebecca opened it to find Amanda standing in the hallway, looking older than her 18 years. Mom. Amanda. Rebecca's heart leaped. Come in, please. I've missed you so much. Amanda stepped into the small apartment and looked around with barely concealed disgust. Dad wanted me to give you something. She handed Rebecca an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a brief note in Vincent's handwriting. Rebecca, this is enough money to start over somewhere else. I suggest you use it wisely. Do not contact Amanda again. Do not contact me. Do not attempt to return to our former social circles. You made your choice. Live with it. V. Amanda, please, Rebecca said desperately. You have to understand. I made mistakes, but I'm still your mother. Are you? Amanda's voice was cold, and Rebecca heard echoes of Vincent in it. Because a mother would have thought about how her actions would affect her daughter. A mother wouldn't have tried to have her daughter's father killed. I never actually tried to kill anyone. Those text messages were just fantasies about murdering the man who loved you and provided for you for 15 years. Amanda's eyes were hard as stone. Do you know what Dad told me? He said you complained about being trapped in this marriage. But he gave you everything, Mom. Freedom, money, security, love. And you threw it all away for Troy Kellerman. Amanda, please. I used to think Dad was cold sometimes. Now I understand why. He learned not to trust people because people like you always disappoint him in the end. Amanda turned to leave, then paused at the door. I'm starting college in the fall. Dad and I are moving to a new house where we can have a fresh start. I won't be seeing you again. Amanda, wait. But her daughter was gone, leaving Rebecca alone with her choices and their consequences. Chapter 9. The Price of Betrayal. 6 months later, Vincent received a report from one of his contacts. Rebecca had used the money to move to Portland, Oregon, where she was working as a waitress in a diner and living in a small apartment above a dry cleaner. She had gained weight, her hair was turning gray, and she looked 10 years older than her actual age. Troy had fled to Europe, where he was attempting to restart his art career under an assumed name. His confession remained in Vincent's safe, ensuring that he would never risk returning to the United States or attempting to contact Rebecca. Vincent read the report with satisfaction, then filed it away. Both Rebecca and Troy were neutralized as threats, living diminished lives that served as reminders of what happened to people who betrayed Vincent Morrison. Amanda was thriving. She had decided to study criminal justice with a focus on federal law enforcement, inspired by her father's work. She was also taking courses in business management, preparing to eventually help Vincent expand his legitimate security consulting business. Dad, she said one evening as they were having dinner in their new house, do you ever regret how things ended with Mom? Vincent considered the question carefully. I regret that your mother forced me to choose between protecting our family and protecting her. But I don't regret the choice I made. She called me last week. Vincent's expression didn't change, but Amanda could sense his attention sharpening. I didn't answer, Amanda continued. But she left a voicemail saying she was sorry and wanted to make things right. What do you want to do about that? Amanda was quiet for a long moment. I want to let her keep calling and getting no answer. I want her to spend the rest of her life knowing that she chose Troy over her own family, and that choice has consequences. Vincent smiled. His daughter was learning. There's something else, Amanda said. I got accepted to the FBI Training Academy's early admission program. If I complete my bachelor's degree with honors, I can start at Quantico right after graduation. That's excellent news. The Bureau could use someone with your intelligence and instincts. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. When you were cleaning up the situation with Mom and Troy, did you ever consider just making them disappear permanently? Vincent studied his daughter's face. She was asking whether he had considered murder as a solution to his family's betrayal. Yes, he said honestly. It would have been simpler in many ways. Why didn't you? Because I wanted them to live with the consequences of their choices. Death would have been an escape. What they have now, Troy looking over his shoulder for the rest of his life, your mother working for minimum wage and growing old alone, that's justice. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. I understand. It's more cruel to let them live with what they've lost than to just end their lives. Cruelty isn't the point, Amanda. Consequences are. I built a life based on loyalty, trust, and protecting the people I care about. When someone betrays that trust, they forfeit their place in that life. Your mother chose to value 8 months of excitement over 15 years of security and love. Troy chose to pursue a married woman without considering what kind of man her husband might be. They both made choices, and choices have prices. Vincent reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. But you chose loyalty. You chose family. And that choice has rewards. Amanda squeezed his hand. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Later that evening, Vincent sat in his study reviewing security reports from his legitimate business. The company was growing rapidly, with contracts from several federal agencies and major corporations. His reputation as someone who could solve problems quietly and efficiently was spreading through the right circles. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Vincent, it's Rebecca. Please, I just want to talk. I know I made mistakes, but we were married for 15 years. That has to mean something. Vincent deleted the message without responding. Rebecca would continue to reach out, and he would continue to ignore her attempts at contact. Eventually, she would understand that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. Another message appeared, this one from Troy. I know you're monitoring my communications. I want you to know that I'm not a threat to you or your family. I just want to live my life in peace. Vincent deleted this message as well. Troy's fear was palpable even through the electronic communication. Good. Fear would keep him far away from Vincent's family. A third message came from an encrypted number, one of his professional contacts. New contract available. High-value target, sensitive elimination. Interested? Vincent typed back, not at this time. Taking a break from field work to focus on family and legitimate business. It was true. Vincent had decided to step back from the darker aspects of his profession. Amanda was starting her adult life, and he wanted to be available to guide her as she navigated college and her career. He had enough money to live comfortably, and his legitimate business was providing both income and intellectual stimulation. He was 52 years old, and he had spent 30 years in a profession that demanded constant vigilance and emotional detachment. For the first time since he was 22, Vincent Morrison was considering the possibility of a peaceful life. But peace, for a man like Vincent, was always conditional. He would always be ready to protect what mattered to him, and he would never again make the mistake of trusting someone who hadn't earned it through years of loyalty and sacrifice. Rebecca and Troy had learned that betrayal carried a price. They would spend the rest of their lives paying it, while Vincent and Amanda built a new life based on the simple principle that had guided Vincent through 3 decades of dangerous work. Trust is earned. Loyalty is rewarded. Betrayal is never forgotten and never forgiven. The price of betrayal wasn't death. It was living with the knowledge of what you had lost and knowing you could never get it back. In his study, surrounded by the quiet wealth he had built through intelligence, ruthlessness, and unwavering loyalty to those who deserved it, Vincent Morrison closed his laptop and went upstairs to say goodnight to his daughter. Outside, the world continued its endless cycle of trust and betrayal, loyalty and deception. But inside the Morrison house, father and daughter slept peacefully, protected by the knowledge that they had chosen each other over everyone else, and that choice had made all the difference. Rebecca would wake up tomorrow in her studio apartment, facing another day of consequence for her choices. Troy would wake up in his European exile, knowing that Vincent's reach extended across oceans and that true freedom was something he would never have again. But Vincent and Amanda would wake up in their new house, planning for Amanda's future and building something that would last, something built on loyalty instead of deception, on trust instead of betrayal. In the end, that was worth more than any revenge Vincent could have taken. The price of betrayal wasn't what Vincent had done to them. It was what they had done to themselves. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.